that's it. These lip speech finishes aren't likely to get you the coveted blue ribbon award at the end of the night. And can change a good speech to a poor one. I've had speeches where I've ended abruptly and I've looked at the audience like a deer in the headlights and said, oh my gosh, they don't know that it's ended. And I've been forced to use these lip endings. The close of your speech should be one of the most important parts of the speech. And many times it's neglected. Tonight we're going to discuss the criteria for a good speech ending, and we're going to discuss 6 different types of techniques that you can use to make your speeches more powerful and memorable. So let's get started. Let me turn this on. There we go. Why isn't it working? It worked earlier. I did try it before, so don't give me points off for this because I tried it before now it's not working. So I will have to change things up a bit. Move over here. And go page down. And why is it stuck? Oh no. Help me, please. Escape? No. It worked before we started to scroll lock off. Okay, wait. Is anyone technically, it says scroll lock off. How could it work before I started this and now it's not? Oh wait, okay, I'll just use this. That's it. Okay, here we go. First, you must achieve a sense of closure. These are the 3 criteria that we're going through. A speech without an ending is like a joke without a punchline. People expect and they look for closure. You can signal your audience with phrases such as, in conclusion, in summary, let me end by saying. So you lead the way for them. You also want to make an impact. Leave a lasting impression. This is your chance to shine. You want to motivate people. You want to make them feel something before they go on their way. And lastly, you only want to take about 5 to 10% of your entire speech on your conclusion. Most of it should be on the body of your speech. So those 3 criteria are all you need for a successful conclusion. Now let's look at some techniques that you can all use to make your speech endings more powerful. You can use a quotation or a poem. That adds authority. I just quoted Einstein. It amuses the listeners and it adds drama to your speech. When you use a quote or a poem, you want to slow down to give it that dramatic flair that you need. Use those dramatic pauses. Reed is a good example of this. He's given a couple of different speeches where he ends with a quote. If you remember that speech he gave on the excessive use of electronic devices, he ended with a quote from Albert Einstein where he said, "It has become appallingly obvious how our technology has exceeded our humanity," which tied in nicely with his whole theme. Another technique is to tell a short story or anecdote. You want to develop it quickly, make it short, and reinforce your message. If it doesn't meet those criteria, you shouldn't use it. people sit up and pay attention when you tell a story. We all have our problems, and people want to be inspired and motivated. So closing with a story is a good technique. And then there's the call for action. If you have a speech to persuade, you want to clearly explain what action the audience should take, what steps they should take. Let's say you're giving a speech on the need to vote. I've got 2 volunteers here. We're going to start with number 1 is Dave, and he's going to give us an example of a wishy-washy closing.
Tonight we've discussed the reasons for voting, to honor those who fought for our right, to change communities, and to help future generations. Maybe you all could consider voting on Tuesday, November 8th.
And now we also have Jeffrey with a more stronger ending.
Tonight we've discussed the reasons for voting. We vote to honor those who fought for our right to vote, to change our communities, and to help future generations. I urge you all to vote on November 8th.
You need to be clear with your call to action. You don't want to suggest or imply. It must be strong. Another example might be if you were speaking to parents about drug problems and drug prevention, you might end your speech with something along the lines of, I want you all to go home tonight and sit your child down, tell him or her that you love him and that you're concerned about him, and talk to him about drugs. Very forceful. Then there is the rhetorical question. Suppose you gave a speech on where you wanted people to vote a certain way on a proposition. You could end your speech with, you may ask, can we afford to do this? I ask, can we afford not to? Ronald Reagan used this technique during his debates, and he won because of it. He used a series of rhetorical questions. He said, next Tuesday, you'll go to the polls. Is there more or less unemployment in this country than there was 4 years ago? Is America more respected in the world than it was? Do you feel that our security is as safe and as strong as we were 4 years ago? If you answer all those questions yes, then I think your choice is obvious. If you don't agree, follow me for the next 4 years. Very strong. You can also, another technique is to refer to the beginning of your speech. I believe Jennifer has used this technique throughout some of her speeches in that Speeches by Management manual. Some of her speeches ended something like this. I began my remarks by reviewing the challenges our company must confront. Let's not be afraid of these challenges. Let's welcome the opportunity to move forward. Where she does a bookmark to the beginning and a bookmark to the end. The last technique is to summarize your main points. You start out by telling them what you're telling them, and then telling them what you're going to tell them. Then the body is telling them, and then your conclusion is telling them what you told them. Jeffrey has used this technique quite successfully. If you'll recall his speech on the merits of libraries, he ended his speech by saying, overall, libraries deserve to be treasured. They are centers of information, they enrich our communities, and they are capable of change. He took it one step farther and threw in another technique where he quoted Albert Einstein again. And he said, the most important thing you have to know is the location of the library. The sentiment was true during his time, it's true today, and with any luck, it'll be true in the future. There are more types of techniques that you can use. You could Google them and find many more. But I think I've given you an arsenal of techniques that you can use. I would be remiss if I didn't give you any tips on how you can ensure your speech ends with impact. You can memorize your conclusion, write it down and memorize it. Sometimes people get what's called in a concluding loop where they don't know exactly where they're going, so they keep going round and round. Memorize it. Then you want to end in time. Any good comedian will tell you that keep them wanting more. Don't go on and on and on. And finally, refrain from adding new points. Sometimes you forget something you should have said earlier in your speech and you throw it in at the end. Don't do that, that just confuses people. Let me reiterate that sometimes an otherwise excellent speech gets marred by a poor ending. Don't let that happen to you. Use the techniques that we've talked about tonight, and your speech will be more memorable and more powerful. I leave you with a quote from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Great is the art of the beginning, but greater is the art of the ending.